Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Daily with Jay and Clay. Glad you made it. Today, we're going to be talking about a great topic. And, this is one of those topics where a lot of you who watch YouTube, watch our individual channels, watch this channel, already have a decent understanding of the claims process from beginning to end. But there's always a little nugget that you can pull out. So whether it's your first claim or you're filing another claim here in the future, this is important information for you to understand and for those that are coming behind us, right? So for our brothers and sisters who are coming out of the military to file a claim and understand what the process is, this is where it's at. And I will tell you that it is a collective. It is all of us working together that really helps our community, and it's your comments that help as well. So with that, I want to turn it over to Clay to just kind of talk a little bit about the claims process at the very beginning. And guess what that is? There are misperceptions out there that are holding back veterans from even filing a claim. So I wanted to start with that, Clay. Dive into it a little bit. Let me know some of the things that you've heard or maybe even experienced yourself with regard to some misperceptions with the VA's claims process.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start with a personal friend of mine. We deployed together. We were in the Marine Corps together. We worked together outside of the Marine Corps when we left, and we're still friends today. And they refuse to file a claim because they just feel like they're not disabled, right? And a little bit of that is also proud. There's a lot of proudness to that, which isn't bad, right? It is completely okay to be proud. But at the same time, this veteran is a little younger. She's like 25, 26. And so that slight knee that she has, that slight pain that she has in her knees, by the time she's 40 or 50, right? And I'm sure everyone that is that age right now is experiencing this, that pain will get worse. And then now you have a time gap. Now it's really difficult to file that or to get service connected for that claim. And so that's one of the things I see is veterans feel like they didn't serve, they just didn't serve. They didn't meet that goalpost. And there's also a lot of pride when it comes to, perceiving, hey, do I deserve VA disability?
Right. Totally. And, one of the things that I find too with this is some of the misperceptions that we have with the VA. And unfortunately, the VA, I don't think they do a good job explaining their own definitions on things. For example, VA disability compensation, right? Well, I'm not disabled, right? We envision I got to roll around in a wheelchair or I have to be missing a limb in order to file for VA disability compensation. So, that's one of my pet peeves is some of the terminology that's used with kind of, I guess, definitions that really don't quite line up with what we believe it would be. Another one for me is the 100% rating. You feel like, okay, well, 100% is 100%. There is nothing more. It can't go any higher. So that should be reserved for the absolute worst case veteran, right? Rolling in the convoy, get hit by the IED, you have some major damage. You're 100%. So when we see other people who go, oh, I'm 100%, and you're scratching your head going, well, you shouldn't be 100%. Because that's the maximum, when the reality is, and you and I know this, is that there's the whole other rating schedule called special monthly compensation. Now, the reason why I think that I wanted to talk about the upstream aspect of VA claims and really touch on this topic of why we don't file is because of the numbers, right? So the numbers are this. Based on a VA 2022 report, there is 18,500,000, I'm going to round, 18,500,000 veterans, okay, for 2022. And of that amount, 5,400,000 are service connected for VA disability compensation. That's 29%. Now, anybody who is service connected for anything goes, wow, that number should be much higher, right? I can guarantee that more than 50% would qualify for something. More than maybe more than 70% of veterans would qualify for something, right? I mean, anything, a 0%, something. So What are your thoughts on that big gap between the service connected at 29% and the non-service connected at 71%?
I don't know the data, but I'm willing to bet money that the veterans that are rated, a vast majority of that 30-ish% are newer veterans. And when I say newer veterans, I mean like 40 and younger, right? Because culture has changed. Just not VA culture, just
Right,
culture in general. You look at the
right,
Vietnam era, they were treated poorly. They were spit on. They were looked. I mean, it was the draft. They were looked down upon, right?
right,
And that's when that pride service comes in. Then you look at the Gulf War, a very, very short war. Not that many people really experienced that combat. So then there's that feeling of, well, did I really serve, right?
right.
And then the introduction of the internet, right, which is awesome. We have YouTube, we have Reddit.
Yeah,
There's,
yeah,
choose your flavor Facebook group for VA claims.
yeah,
Now veterans are getting educated, and so I'm willing to bet the veterans that are rated kind of
yeah.
fall within that younger generation, and that younger is relative. Obviously,
Right.
you're going to have your outliers, but I'm hoping 20, 30 years, we will see that number increase, right? And
Right.
and and we can't forget about those that have came before us, right? Like the Vietnam
Right.
era, the Gulf War era, the Korea era. We have to educate and then get those veteran service connected.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I pulled up a just from a website. Doesn't mean that it's all 100% true, but it gives us a good kind of a baseline anyway, or some sort of an idea of some other reasons why. So it's here is the 10 common reasons veterans don't file for VA disability compensation. Lack of knowledge about the process, and that's what you were alluding to right there. Is the ones before us. I mean, here's your DD 214. There's the gate. See ya. Right.
Yeah.
So it's gotten better. Um, I would say that it is really a for us by us type of a betterment. I mean, yes, of course, the government through the VA and other resources has stepped it up some, of course, but I think that it's the word of mouth and us taking care of each other through
Mhm.
all the different means, like you said. Number two, fear of being denied. So I never really thought about that, but that does kind of make sense. Nobody wants to be told no and, kick rocks and you don't rate. Who are you? We kind of come from this culture, right? Of somebody else had it worse off than me. Suck it up, move forward, right? So, to go in and feel like, well, why are you even here is a bit frightening. Um, Number three, difficulty obtaining and submitting necessary documentation. Yeah, it
Yeah.
can be labor intensive. Difficulty in proving service connection, which we'll talk about that as we dive a little deeper into this. Belief that their injury or illness is not serious enough. Absolutely. That's your friend you were talking about, right?
Mhm.
This doesn't bother me that much. Or as you get older, you're like, well, this is just part of being older, right? When really you can trace it all the way back. Number six, difficulty in navigating the VA disability system. I agree. Belief that they're not eligible for VA disability benefits. Number eight, lack of support from family and friends. I never really thought about that, but I mean, if you start having conversations and, we all know there's a lot of naysayers, right? So, especially when you get outside of your military brother and sisterhood, you're going to have
Oh yeah.
people that are saying, well, you don't deserve that. You can walk, you can, that's for other people. So they're going to double down on those misperceptions of what VA disability is and what it's for. Next one says post-traumatic stress and other mental health issues could cause, potential blocks to going and getting anything done, whether it's just fear of being looked at a certain way or just not really thinking clearly on these things or even options. And then the last one says financial concerns, because you see a lot of ads out there that, hey, come to me and you have to pay for the services. Well, you and I both know that there's 1,000 other resources. And if you can't find one that's free, you can also file for yourself. And I want to say that, on this channel, we're really about empowering, right? Empowering people. And is there a place for a paid service? Sure. Somewhere in the process, sure there is. Where is it? It's different for everybody. But I'm a firm believer on finding an accredited rep, have the conversations with them, and or try to do it yourself first. And then if it starts falling apart and you need more help, you can always do that later. So anyway, that's the top 10. Were there any other on there that you could think of, or anything that sparked interest in your mind, Clay?
More so on the paid services, and you're right. That's a good way to put it. That it looks different for everyone. And something I always tell veterans is it doesn't matter, even if it's an attorney, right? And we're going the legal route to a paid service, or if you go to a claims consulting company, whatever it is you do, it doesn't matter who you go with. They have zero input as to if your claim is going to get approved. It
Right.
comes down to one thing
Yep.
and one
Yep.
thing only, and that's evidence.
Yeah.
Right. So company X didn't get you that rating, right? They may have helped and soothed the process,
Right.
but your evidence got you that rating. And that's a decision that everyone has to make for themselves. I'm on the side of using an accredited rep, whether that's a VSO,
Yep.
or an attorney for appeals. And then my fan favorite, right, is just filing yourself.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to throw in here VSO. VSO, the acronym or the three letters is always frustrating for me because it means two different things. It can either mean a veteran service organization like VFW, American Legion, DAV, Paralyzed Veterans, Purple Heart, you name them, right? So that's a veteran service organization. And they do have, a lot of them, accredited representation that can help you with your claim at different levels. They have people that do it full time and help people all the time, or they have people that are just like, hey, look, I'm just doing it on the side to help out my local post or whatever it is, and it's every other Thursday that I help. The rest of the time, I'm doing whatever else, right? Then you also have VSO, which is Veteran Service Officer. They are typically a county employee in the state in which you live, and they are running an office of accredited representatives that can also help you with your claim, and it's all full time, and they're paid for primarily by the county, but they also receive state funds. So Veteran Service Officer and Veteran Service Organization, two different VSOs that are doing the same type of thing, but from different angles. So awesome. Now, the next kind of, now that we've gotten over the hump of all of that, I'm going to throw this in there. Whether or not you fall in any of those categories of why you don't feel you deserve or you should file a claim, I'm going to streamline it here. My kind of take on it is, look, it's two different government organizations. You have your DOD stuff, your military branch. You have the VA, right? Two different organizations. The VA is part of your benefits package when you join the military. If you worked for any other organization in the world and they said, hey, guess what? We are a pre-IPO company, right? And when we're planning on going public, and so we're going to give you a bunch of stock, and all you got to do is put in 5 years and you get this stock and you're fully vested, right? Then you do your 5 years with that company and you leave, and then the company goes public and that's your stock. You're not going to say, I don't need, I left early. I don't, save it for somebody else who needs it. I don't really. No, you would be taking every single nickel of that money. The VA is part of your benefits package. And here's the key. Regardless if you were an E3 or an 08, we were all severely underpaid compared to our civilian counterpart. Look at all of the contract companies. I mean, I got friends that you signed up, they got out of the military, went contractor, went over there and got paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for a 6-month deployment, right? So we're severely underpaid compared to our civilian counterpart. Why? Because we have a tremendous back-end benefits package. And so don't leave it on the table. Don't leave any money on the table. Get the care and the compensation that you deserve. So how you're going to do that is what we're going to slide into now. The number one most important thing, Clay, I think, is filing an intent to file, because it takes the pressure off of the individual. It allows them to focus on developing the claim. And I'd love to hear from you. How important is the intent to file? How does it work? And what's the magic? Is it a pain? It sounds like it's another thing I got to deal with. Tell me a little bit about it and what kind of advantages you get from it.
Yeah, so when you said developing a claim, that's really what the intent to file is. I think the ITF intent to file is completely overlooked and it's not really talked about on in the community at all, especially on YouTube. But the intent to file gives you time to develop that claim. I can't tell you how many times a veteran submits a claim, they get denied. They say, "Hey, I have all the evidence," and like, "Oh, well, can I see the decision letter?" I look at it, no in-service event, no current diagnosis. I'm like, man, okay, breathe, no big deal. Let's go ahead and look at the in-service event, right? So that's what the intent to file is made for, to develop your claim. I would approach a claim like a court case, right? And if I wanted to prove my disability is service connected, what I'm going to do is say, hey, here's the evidence from service. Here's why it's connected to service. Here's my current diagnosis, my current treatment, my symptoms, whatever that looks like for you. And then I would submit that claim, right? And then you're going to go to an exam, and that's further along in the process. But I do think the intent to file is often overlooked, and it's one
Hmm.
of the easiest things to submit because all
How
you
many
got
pages is it?
pages in it's one
There you
page.
go.
That's if you're filing on a paper, right? So if
Yeah.
you go to a VSO rep or whoever, and they're able
Hmm.
to submit a intent to file, they can do that. Or right now, in about probably 4.5 minutes, probably 3 minutes, to be honest with you, you can go on va.gov, click file a claim online. It'll say, "Are you active duty?" You're obviously going to say no. It'll say, "Is this your first time filing a claim?" You go ahead and answer that question. The second you do that, you have the intent to file, right?
Nice.
It's
Nice.
extremely easy, and you don't have to. You have an entire year. It's 364 days actually to get that claim submitted.
Nice. Don't wait till the last minute. That's stressful. But so yeah, so you have a full year, well, 364 days that the intent to file is in place. So that's good. You can also call the VA, in my understanding, and you can also tell them, "Hey, I am veteran so and so, and I'd like to put in an intent to file," and they can do that for you over the phone for those that have computer issues or whatever. Now, I guess with the intent to file, all the different things that you were talking about with the claim process is really that allows you that time to really focus on that. Now, with the intent to file, I have one last question for you. When the VA decides your claim, what happens once they decide a claim and they're are what does the intent to file do for that once
Yeah,
they actually decide?
that's a great point, and it's also important to remember our new veterans, right? So if you just left service, that date, let's say you got out July 2nd, that date is your intent to file all the way up to July 1st of the next year, right? So intent to files for new veterans are automatic. For everyone else, it's the actual intent to file date. But what it
Yep,
does is back pay.
there you go.
It's back pay. Also, something to keep in mind, it's because right now we're in this culture of changes, right? We have changes to the rating schedule. So, whatever the rating schedule was during that intent to file, the VA is going to have to consider that, right? And looking at tinnitus and sleep apnea, that's going to be in your favor.
Huge, huge,
So there's,
huge.
there's really there's really no, I can't think of a single reason to not have an intent to file ready.
Right,
Worst scenario, you don't use it, right?
right. Yeah, you know what, and I agree with you. And the only reason that I've ever had in my mind why you would not file an intent to file is because you did not know about an intent to file and you've already spent months developing your claim and you're ready to file.
Yeah.
Then you would just file your claim. That is the only reason why you would not file an intent to file. So now we've talked about the reasons why people don't. You got to set that aside, utilize your benefits, file that intent to file, and start developing your claim. So let's talk about what it takes to have a successful claim with the VA. Now, I'll give you my version first, and then I'd love to kind of hear your version.
Mhm.
So my version, and I'll try to streamline it because sometimes I can get talking. So, all right. When it comes to preparing your claim for VA disability compensation, you have two goals in my mind, in my kind of own version. One is get service connected, and two is make sure you get the appropriate rating. And you can accomplish both of those things while you're developing the claim in that year-long time period that you have from your intent to file. How do you get a service connection? Well, the three pillars that you need to accomplish here are you have to have time in service. The time in service that you have creates a window of opportunity. This window of opportunity is really for your service-connected conditions. Your presumptives are kind of outside of this. So anything other than a presumptive condition, which will be another video, I'm sure. So you have this window of opportunity from here to here, entry date, exit date. Number two, the second pillar is you must have a diagnosed condition, right? Self-diagnosing doesn't count in this world. You actually need to provide evidence of a condition. That condition must be chronic in nature or have some sort of residual effects. In other words, it can't be I scraped my arm once, it completely healed, and I have no issues, right?
Mhm.
You're completely fixed, there's no problems. You have to have an ongoing issue. Number three is a nexus, a link between the condition and your window of opportunity, your time in service. Now, what I like to say is it's a little more complicated than just a one word piece, nexus, right? What it is, in my mind, is what the VA is looking for is you have either manifested that condition during your time in service or your condition is as a result of your time in service. So it either manifested during your time in service or as a result of your time in service. If you can answer yes to either one of those, you're good to go. Now, that's getting service connected. And then the second piece is getting that appropriate rating, right? And I really lean on, and I'm not going to dive into it because we can talk more later on it, is utilizing the schedule of ratings, absolutely, to make sure that you identify where you fall on that VA rating schedule. So with that, Clay, I know it was long-winded, and I
No, that's
apologize.
good. That was great.
Please give me kind of your version, double tap, dismantle mine, whatever you need to do. I would love to hear it in a different way.
Oh yeah. So it's often referred to as the big three, right? The in-service event, the current diagnosis, and the nexus. And that's 38 CFR. You can read that. That's every single claim ever needs the big three, no matter what. Now, the in-service event, and I'll just break this down Barney style, something in service caused that condition. Okay. So whether that's a car accident, right? You were driving a truck out of range or whatever, you got in a car accident. Maybe you had a car accident just on, enjoying your time off.
Mm-hmm.
Either one of those. But the point is, something happened in service. Now I'm going to dive a little deeper into it. The golden ticket, so to speak, is evidence from service. That is going
Mm-hmm.
to will carry your claim all the way to the end for the nexus. Now there's different types of evidence. You have medical evidence, right? Which is, oh, I'm sick. Let me go talk to the doc, right? Let me talk to the corpsman. Let me go to medical, wherever that looks like. If you have pain in your knees, pain in the back, maybe you fell during a hike, whatever that looks like, that's medical evidence. Now, to our understanding, and every veteran knows this, you don't go to medical, right? It's
Right.
shunned. You're the black sheep of your unit the second you step foot in medical. And I mean, to be blunt, that sucks. But don't worry, there's also evidence other than medical, right? Personnel records, you can have statements that could act as a self-reporting evidence. There's like safety reports. So if you
Mm-hmm.
were in a car accident, there is your unit, someone somewhere, there's a safety officer, there's a report of that accident, I promise. And so that is evidence other than medical. So there's definitely other ways to
Mm-hmm.
connect that. And you can kind of think outside the box a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you this. We had one veteran who was filing an MST claim, which is military sexual
Mm-hmm.
trauma, which is just bad news. I hate saying it every time I do, but they didn't have medical evidence, which is a huge punch to the gut. But
Mm-hmm.
She was a Marine. The Marine Corps has fitness reports, right? Which is an annual report of how you did every year. And you have pros and cons. And I'm sure other services have something similar. But with
Mm-hmm.
her statements and with dates and times, you could
Yep.
see a decline
Yep.
of her fitness reports. That is great
Yep.
evidence to show,
Yep.
hey, this event happened. My
Right.
performance had a sharp decline, right? So
Yep.
there's other ways to get evidence.
Yep.
But the bottom line is something happened to cause
Right.
death, right?
Yep.
That looks different for everyone.
Now, I'm excited. I'm excited right here because, and it was so hard for me because I have a little bit of a disagreement, and I'm excited because that's what this is for, right? It's to have these types of conversations and to be able to kind of air it out and, see what happens. I don't feel that everything needs to have an in-service event or something in service to point to. Simply getting diagnosed in service is enough. So, in other words, what would be the in service event for my migraine headaches or my GERD, right? Or if I'm, whatever it is, name the illness, right? So, injuries, yes, because you got injured. There's something that happened. You didn't just wake up with a broken arm. But the diseases, right? The migraine headaches, the example that I would give on my channel would be, you could come from a family of migraine sufferers, right? That's kind of in your family. People have migraines, but you never had a migraine ever. You join the military, you check all the boxes. Nope, no issues, clean as a whistle, no problems ever. A couple years in, all of a sudden, you start getting migraines. You talk about them while you're in service. You mention them. You check them on your annual health assessment. You get out, you file a claim with the VA. You provide that evidence, and guess what? You're service connected for migraines. What's the in-service event?
So it's more of a technicality. The in-service event for VA rating purposes
Yep.
would be that complaint, right?
Got it.
So it's not always an event. It could also
See?
be you going to
Yes.
the doc would be the event, right?
Perfect. And that is exactly what we need to talk about, because it goes back to the beginning, the misperceptions, right? In-service event, I didn't have a Humvee fall on me, right? I don't have an in-service event. So why would I go file a claim for this? Well, because the definition from the VA sucks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if instead the VA said, hey, if you complained about it, if you mentioned it, if it's and really we can go down the rabbit hole with the whole at least likely is not thing, right? And the nexus letters and all that. But the reality is that if the VA, I think, had a better definition for things, it would open up our eyes a little more. And so I think it goes back to the whole just misperceptions, right? Like using the word disability. Well, I don't really feel disabled per se, right? So why would I file for disability compensation? What's the in-service event? Well, I don't know. I mean, there really wasn't anything. So I'm glad that you clarified it, because that is an important piece for people to understand, that it's not necessarily the Humvee fell on me, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I get it. That's no. It's I'm speechless too. So
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good.
So good. Yeah, I'm glad that I said it, right? Because that's what this is about. Is about, making sure that everybody understands it the same way, right? So now we're working on developing our claim, right? We're working on getting the information we need, which is what we talked about, right? The big three, and documenting it. Now, the question always comes, right? Of, well, what if I didn't document anything when I was in, right?
Yeah.
Chances are, if it was a major injury, you probably had it documented. If it was not, or there was an event, right? Like you got in the car wreck, but you just, no, I'm fine, and you walked away, but you have evidence of the car wreck, right? But for the more, at the time, minor injuries, right? Just being like a mortarman, for example, right? Or a mechanic, or aircraft fuel system guy crawling in the fuel tanks and stuff. For more minor injuries, musculoskeletal stuff, or diseases like migraines or or GERD, the bad heartburn, what do we say? What does somebody need to do to help them with their claim, developing it? Because remember, we're still in that, we haven't even filed it yet. We're still in this portion of getting everything together, right? And I never went to sick call, but I have some like back issues, and I have GERD, and I have migraine headaches, right? But it's not in my military records anywhere. Do I have a possibility? Do I have a chance? What do you say to that, Clay?
That is okay. We would be wrong if we didn't say it's an uphill battle, right?
Right.
And so the less evidence you have, the harder it's going to be to get service connected. That's a fact. They're not out of hope though, okay?
Right.
And so there's data sets, right? Let's just take the inventory as an example. One of my personal friends actually recently was denied bilateral knee pain in each knee. They had zero evidence. They had 7 deployments. All of them were Iraq, Afghan related, all 7 of them. And so I was like, hey, I think you should do a higher level review, write a statement, talk to the rater, and just say, did you consider, I know you looked at medical evidence, it's not there, but did you consider my 7 deployments? And
Right.
the rater says, well, in that instance, that CMP examiner did not consider evidence other than medical, which is,
Right.
the CMP examiner is a medical professional. I don't expect them to look
Right.
at anything outside of medical, right?
Yeah.
Now, does it suck that they had to go through that long process? Yes, but you know what? They just got service connected on those needs conditions
Yeah.
with 0 in-service events, right? But the
Right.
technicality is the
Right.
deployment became
Yep.
that in-service event.
Absolutely. So you're still leveraging something from your in-service, your window of opportunity, right? So it would be the same as saying, maybe like tinnitus, for example, and utilizing your MOS, right, as your
Exactly.
evidence, right? The MOS is my evidence, and then the likelihood is that threshold, that VA threshold that we all love so much, is the bar is set fairly low for anything in the legal world, and it's right? As long as it's at least likely as not, meaning that if the evidence is in equipoise, equal on both sides, the VA is supposed to rule in your favor. Do they do it all the time? No, they'll screw it up, but that's why you have the whole process to undo their wrongs. So I agree with you absolutely. The idea that it's easy is not. I call it building a bridge back to your time in service, utilizing the buddy statements. Let's say that it's something for like the GERD, right? GERD, bad heartburn, or migraines, something that you didn't mention when you were in service at all. These are great because you can get medication over the counter for these types of things and self-medicate. So why would I get it documented when I was in? I'm taking care of it, right? So what something like that would look like potentially would be, you would write a statement yourself. All right. So there's a form for that. You'd write your statement yourself, explaining that you would go to the medic or the corpsman and you'd get a handful of antacid or a handful of ibuprofen, and you just dealt with it. You go to the grocery store and you just dealt with it. Then you would have, if you were married at the time, right, you could have your spouse write a letter. If you know anybody from your time in service, they could write letters for you attesting to knowing that you had suffered from GERD or migraines or both or whatever. And then you would go to your doctor and you would talk to your doctor, and your doctor's going to ask you, how long have you had this problem? And you would say, oh, well, back in 1994, it first really started hitting me, and that was a couple years into the Marine Corps or whatever it is, right? And so all of those letters together help to create evidence, building a bridge back to your time in service, helping you to establish a nexus, right? So the nexus letter from your doctor helps you provide the nexus to the VA. So very important information. Now the question now comes, we've got all that stuff, we've bundled it all up. We've got evidence from different places, and we're still missing a couple things maybe, right? So we got things kind of put together. We're looking at the schedule of ratings now. Okay. Now I'm going to front load this a little bit for you, Clay, because I'm going to kick it back to you.
Okay.
Okay. So you as a veteran are looking at your conditions. Now, this works for some, not all, right? Some of your conditions they are what they are, right? Like hypertension, your numbers are your numbers. You can't say anything different to change what your numbers are. But other
Absolutely.
things like migraines and GERD have to do with how you explain how you feel and the symptoms that you have. So as you review the schedule of ratings, right, then you can take that information with you to your doctor. You still have not filed a claim, right? You're still utilizing your intent to file timeline. And you go to your doctor with the information you found from the schedule of ratings, and you take with you a form you can pull offline, DBQ. Take it from there on kind of how you can merge those things together and how important it is to get the correct type of information.
Yeah, so I am so glad we are going down this road right now. Something I see, I think this is the number one thing that veterans don't do for their claims, which is document their symptoms. Okay, again, let's go back to the court case, right? Your claim is a court case. It is a legal document. If I'm going to win that court case, you need to have evidence. We know self-reporting. The VA is not calling you a liar, although it may seem like that sometimes, right? But if there was a totem pole of what's most important, a self-report is all the way at the bottom. Hey, CMP examiner, I get migraines twice a week, right? That's not invalid, right? That's still a valid symptom. But if you went to, prior to submitting that claim using your intent to file, if you went to your primary care at the VA or private, right, whichever you prefer, and you say, hey doc, I get really bad migraines 2-3 times a month. I have headaches every now and then, but when it's a migraine, like I'm taking Tylenol, it's not working. You might get prescribed sumatriptan, which is a very, very common medication for migraines, right? And this works for any disability. We're just focusing on migraines right now. So now let's look at evidence, right? Now it's no longer a self-report of I get these migraines. Now you have a prescription, right? You have documented evidence, medical evidence from your doctor saying symptom XYZ. And now that is evidence, right? That is hard medical evidence. And the VA cannot ignore that, right? I'm going to say they can ignore your self-report, and that's really a bad taste about it, right? But they could find, a better way to say that is they can find evidence that would trump your self-report, right?
Right.
But if you have medical evidence, they can't argue
Right.
that, period, right? And furthermore, if you, during that CMP exam, if your symptoms are annotated incorrectly, which is a very common problem, now you have evidence to combat that. I can tell you this, your word of mouth is not going to beat a nurse practitioner or a physician or a PA, right? So medical evidence is key, and it really goes back to that intent to file. Put the time you spend on the front end gathering the evidence is time you're not going to spend in appeals, which is its own nightmare.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So my take on it is read through the schedule of ratings for your conditions. Now it's cumbersome. I get it. And for most people, it's going to be a little bit of a nightmare, but you can figure it out. I trust. You can Google search VA rating schedules. It'll pull up the VA's website. In there, you're going to see a bunch of different what they call books. Those books are basically Word documents inside there, broken down into different body systems like muscular, skeletal, neurological, and so forth. You click on the one that makes sense for whatever your condition would be in. Then what I do is I hit Control F and I search the word I'm looking for. So I would do neurological. Then it's going to say schedule of ratings. I would click on that. Up pops the Word document. Then Control F, type in migraines. It'll take you right to it. Now, you can read through it. And this is what I tell people all the time. You are the patient. You know you better than anybody. It's not like you're doing something deceitful. Read what the VA is looking for whatever rating criteria, for whatever percentage, right? So migraines for a 50% requires this. Do I have that or do I not? Yes or no? You're the patient. I don't know, right? If you have it, awesome. Now you know the exact words that the VA is looking for instead of guessing, right? I can't tell you how many times I hear people, no matter what the condition is, go, just tell them how impactful it is to your life, right? Well, that's not what the VA is looking for. They're looking for some specific things for that condition. Now, you might run into a CMP examiner that walks you down the right path, hopefully, but most of the time they're just asking you questions, and you're either going to answer them correctly or not to warrant yourself the correct rating. So the appropriate way is to find that rating. If you can't do it on the VA's website, there's 1,000 lawyer firms out there that if you type in your condition, VA rating schedule migraines, for example, they'll pop up on their website with the actual rating schedule, and it should be correct. That's what they do for a living. So read through them. If you're a 50%, you're a 50. If you're a 30, you're a 30. My thing is, look, copy and paste it, write it down, do something with it. Take it out so you have it in your hand. Then find the corresponding DBQ, disability questionnaire. Take both of those with you to your doctor, your primary doctor, and say, hey, look, I need you to fill this out. Now, I get it. Some doctors are hesitant, especially if it's a VA doctor. It just depends on what medical center you're in. Some are more apt to helping than others. If it's a private doctor, even they sometimes get weird because it's like extra work. But how I frame it is, hey, I am putting in a claim with the VA to help reimburse me for my medical expenses. The doctor hears, oh, they can come see me and get their medical expenses reimbursed. Hey, I'm going to help you, right? I'm going to help you. So now there's two ways, and I'm not, this is filled with so much nuance, right? So it's hard to hit it for every single person. Depending on your relationship with your doctor, you might be able to go in and have a sit down with your doctor right there with them and fill it out all together. That's awesome. Some people have that. Some don't. You're going to have to take it to the front office, hand it to them. What I would do, because again, I'm the patient. You're the patient. You know you better than the doctor does, believe it or not. Read each question on the disability questionnaire. Write the answers down on another piece of paper on what you experience. Then give the doctor's office both of those and have the doctor complete the form. He can use your notes because he doesn't have you with him to ask questions. Now, you want to make sure that you incorporate in all of the information from the schedule of ratings into your answers verbatim, because that is what the VA is looking for. You're trying to make their job as easy as possible. I know I don't like to give them excuses, but they have stacks of claims. Theoretically, they're in a computer, but pretend that there's files just stacked up everywhere around them. They're just trying to get through it and go home and have dinner. So the faster you can make it pop out to them that you should be a 30% rating, then that's what you should be. I'm a fan of providing the DBQ with the information from the schedule of ratings only.
Great.
Garbage in, garbage out. Don't guess what needs to go in the schedule of ratings. That's dumb. Or don't guess what needs to go into the disability questionnaire. That's dumb. Get the information that they're looking for and put it in there. Okay. You can even highlight it, circle it, point to it, whatever you want. Now, you can even, for each one of your conditions, put a little cover letter on there and go, this rating, evidence based on whatever, be page 1, 2, and 3, state this should be rating of X. Right? Who cares? You can do that. The VA doesn't care what you give them. They're just looking at all of it. This is helping the raters to go, oh, okay, well, let me flip to that page. Oh, the doctor does say that. Oh, let me cross-reference that with the schedule of ratings. Oh, yeah, it is that. Done. Next. So it's just very important. And I start getting all crazy and animated because, like you referenced before, people miss out on this. And I think that it's because we get so amped up about filing a claim that we just think the faster I can get it filed, the better. I want to get this thing in process. So utilize that intent to file to take the pressure off so you can set it up right.
Oh,
so
yeah,
now,
there's also something else.
Yeah, go.
So I'll give a personal experience, right? When I left the Marine Corps, I didn't know what mental health was. No one really knows what it is. I had zero idea what I was doing. I know I had some treatment in the past. We won't really go into that, but I didn't really know what suffering from mental health looked like. And so whenever I read the schedule of ratings, it was like looking in a mirror. I was like, that's what's going on, right? Hey, that's me, right?
Yeah.
Without that kind of guide, like a DBQ is a guide, right? It's a guide to service connection.
Right.
without a list of those symptoms, I would
You don't
still,
know. Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know. So
Absolutely.
something
It's
else to think.
eye-opening. It is eye-opening. It is absolutely the biggest piece of gold in all of this is understanding that rating schedule for all kinds of different factors, even understanding how many different things are rateable. It's like, oh my God, it's infinite. It goes on forever. Motor tics I bring up to people, like, the twitch in the eye or what have you. That's a rateable condition. So, to ignore it is not advantageous. Now, let's say that now we've done all this. We've decided to file the claim. We put in the intent to file to buy us the 12 months. We've now developed the claim. We got all the evidence that we need. We even went the extra step and actually read the schedule of ratings. We got the DBQs completed. We got nexus letters if we needed them. We got buddy statements if we needed them for the stuff that was out of service. We got all of that stuff ready to go. And now we're ready to file that claim. What does that look like in your mind now that you've got all your evidence? Is it hard? Is it scary? What does the form look like? What's the form number if you know it?
Yeah, so it's 526 easy, and it depends what kind of claim we're talking about. But I will tell you my
We'll say
perspective.
the initial claim,
Yeah,
first run.
yeah. So 526 easy, but if I was to do a picture perfect, here's how you file a claim, what I would do is you have the intent to file, you've gathered all the evidence, right? You know what your service treatment records say. You have, if you're using evidence other than medical, you have that on hand. You have your current evidence, current meaning within 1 year, right? Whether it's a diagnosis, a documented symptom, a prescribed medicine, whatever that looks like for you, you have it all wrote together. And then you go to a veteran service rep, a VSO rep, whether it's VFW, whoever, you say, hey man, hey woman, can you submit this claim, right? That would be the picture perfect
Yeah.
way of doing it. Now, there's other
Mhm.
ways to do it, but I can tell you if I was a VSO and someone came in and was like, hey, here's all my evidence, here's this, here's that, can you file it? I'm like, yeah, give me a minute and a half.
Right.
They will do what I call VA stuff. They'll go through the VBMS system, and if they
Mhm.
don't have access to that, then they will prepare the claim and then hand it off to someone within that organization that does have access to VBMS. And that's pretty much how you file a claim picture perfectly. But of course, you
Yep.
can do it yourself online. You can upload your own evidence online just through va.gov and through quick submit. And then if you're using an accredited rep, they can also help you file those initial claims as well.
Yep. That's awesome. So, totally agree. And what happens is with we'll say most, especially the county run, you're a county employee, VSO, veteran service officer with veteran service reps. You have a common access card. It's a PIV card that allows you to remote access into the VA system and follow the claims that are filed under you. Now, you will need to sign over basically authority to that organization to view your file in VBMS. Now, if you have one place do that for you, and then you meet somebody somewhere else and says that they can also check it, be wary, because if you then appoint them to view your records, the other place that did it for you can no longer view your records. Only one place can have that appointment at a time. So if it's DAV and then a veteran service officer, two different entities, you kind of have to pick which one you want to have that ability. So just throwing that out there. So great. So now your claims filed. You had that second set of eyes on it from an accredited rep, which is always good. Make sure that you didn't miss a checkbox somewhere or what have you. The claim is now filed and it's in the VA's hands. So now I'm going to throw out there that at this point, because the VA now has that claim and they have now attached that initial intent to file to that claim's off and running with that earlier effective date. You can now file a new intent to file if you go, I forgot, I wanted to file this other thing, but whatever, we'll let this one ride, and they should have it resolved within whatever, 10 months or something, then you have this other intent to file that's ready to go for just in case, right? Just like you said before, Clay, if you don't use it, it just expires and it goes away. Now, before we get to the C&P exam kind of portion of this video, I want to go back a little bit to, I'm getting ready to file my claim, but I'm filing for 5 conditions. For whatever reason, my 5 conditions, I only have information for 2. My other 3, life happened. I didn't go to the doctor. I'm still waiting on some stuff from National Archives. It's just been a crazy year. My wife's pregnant and, whatever, right? Life is happening. And now your intent to file is going to expire. You have 3 conditions that have 0 evidence, and you have 2 that have full evidence. I'll give you my answer, but I want to hear what you would suggest somebody to do in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I'll hear you first.
Yeah. So this is debatable. Okay. I would recommend you have evidence for 2. You want to file 5. You don't have evidence for the 3. That intent to file is running out. I'm going to recommend you file all 5 claims. Okay. There's a few different things that can happen from this. Let's just go to the one that's most probable, which is the 3 are going to be denied, right?
Yep.
Which is bad, right? We can all agree with that. But you have the appeal process that that will go all the way back to the original intent to file, right? So I guess it's not a big deal. It's not good, but it's not a huge deal, right? Because you're going to have to deal with some appeal processes.
Yep.
But the other side of that is, hey, do you have to submit evidence with your claim? You don't have to. It's not required.
Right.
I think everyone should.
Yep.
You don't have to. So the VA is going to have your service treatment records.
Yep.
You're going to have your VA medical records. And then if you gave the VA access to your private records, they will have those as well. You have to give the VA access to your private records.
Right.
So they can do it themselves, right? So those 3 conditions could very well come back service connected, which would be good.
Depending. Yeah, depending on what they can find. Yeah.
It's not the end of the world. You know?
Yep. No, I'm so glad you said it, and I had a feeling you would. It's very important for people to understand that you are preserving that intent to file date by filing by name all of the conditions that you want to file for, regardless if you have the evidence or not, because it will buy you more time. Now the VA has to process your claim. They're going to deny you potentially. And then if they do, you're going to be able to turn around and file a supplemental claim with additional evidence to then keep that initial effective date in place, thus buying you more time to go gather all that evidence. So it's just an important piece that I kind of feel like we needed to talk about it there. And we'll dive into these other things here at the tail end if you disagree with the decision. So now our claims filed. Everything's rolling. We even threw in an additional intent to file just in case. We're sitting pretty. Our veteran service organization or veteran service office has our appointment authority. They can pull up and make sure that things are happening. Even my rooster agrees. And so here we are. And now we get notification of the C&P exam. And I'll tell you, for those of you that have never been to a C&P exam, doing a brand new claim and going to your C&P exam, it is a little bit stressful because you don't really know in the name of it, C&P exam, and boy, are they going to be grilling me, and I've heard horror stories that they're watching me from the parking lot, and they're watching me walk in, they're paying attention to everything. And so it can create a lot of, I think, stress and anxiety, especially going to the first one. I mean, I've been to enough to where it's like, I don't even care, it's whatever. It's I way overthought it the first time. And I am zero scared, zero worried. I don't care what anybody is thinking. I go in, I do what I have to do, and I leave. So what are your thoughts on preparing for, and we'll call it passing just because it's called an exam, right? So prepare for and pass the C&P exam. And oh, by the way, what the hell is C&P? Can you tell people what that means, and then give them the tips and tricks on successfully making it through it?
Yeah, so it's VA, or it's compensation and pension, which are two different things. We're focused on the compensation part. The pension, it deserves its whole other video. But it's an exam where the examiner, whether that's a nurse practitioner, physician, physician assistant, psychologist, psychiatrist, neurologist, name your flavor, right? Will observe and examine your symptoms to evaluate your symptoms, saying this is the severity of these symptoms, and then most importantly, they will give a nexus, right? The nexus is the big mamma jamma of that exam, and then also the severity of symptoms. And I will say this, and I'm not VA bashing. Okay, I think that's a poison in the community.
Hmm.
I would at least argue that. But the number one thing that's wrong with the VA, in my opinion, are the process of CMP exams.
Hmm.
Um, Examiners only see evidence the VA gives them, right?
Right.
Examiners are not obligated to look at evidence that you bring. They don't have to at
Hmm.
all, right? So now there's that legality play there. And then it's a lot of personality based, right? And
Yeah.
so my CMP exams, which were a few years ago, I can tell you one examiner was just confrontational, right?
Mm.
Very confrontational, didn't really want to hear my symptoms. It was more yes, no. And I'm not a big fan of that at all. But then it goes back to what we said earlier. Because I had evidence,
Right.
it's irrefutable, right?
Right.
Now, had if that evidence is not there, all of a sudden that CMP exam becomes the sole source of the evidence. Now you
Yep.
might be in trouble. And so I'm not bashing CMP examiners. Some are really good. Some are. It's a government contract, right? Let's just be real. It's the lowest bidder. I get
Right.
that. And you're not going to find, Johns Hopkins psychiatrist instructor as a CMP examiner. That's not who you're going
Right.
to find. You're going to find psychologist so and so trying to pay off medical debt. I get that, but it really goes back to, if you have evidence, you can always lean on that, right? And in the event that you don't have evidence, that CMP examiner becomes the gospel, right?
Right. So I think that you hammered a couple things there. One is that they're not really trying to typically diagnose you. What they're trying to do is determine if there's a nexus, because you've already the VA mostly has already conceded that, yeah, of course you're diagnosed with this. You've provided that, right? So we're taking it to the next step here with the CMP to help determine nexus and figure out where you fall on that rating schedule. Okay, because chances are, for most people, unless you're actually listening to us and you're providing all the information needed to your primary doctor and it's getting submitted as evidence, a lot of people don't do that. So the VA goes, okay, great, you're diagnosed with migraines, but are you a 50? Are you a 30? Are you a 10? We need to get this cleared up so we can make a decision. And we need to do it in a repeatable way. And that's where the DBQs come into effect.
Mm-hmm.
But DBQs, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't know what they're looking for, well, then you're not going to put in the right information, right? You might get lucky, you might not, whatever. So I pulled up the schedule of ratings here for migraines. And for those that don't know, and migraines for a rating of, and I like to start from the bottom, right? And then go, okay, do I meet that criteria? Okay, let's go to the next one. So the 0% rating for migraine says with less frequent attacks, period. That's it. So less frequent. Well, less frequent than what? I don't know. So 0% is basically, if you're diagnosed with migraines, you're at least going to get, and it's service, you provided the nexus, right? So if you have a nexus, you have a diagnosis, you should be rated at a minimum 0% for migraines. And then you move up to 10 with characteristics of prostrating attacks averaging 1 and 2 months over the last several months. So it's kind of weird how that wording is. They're not saying over your lifetime or anything like that. They're saying over the last several months. So then again, what's several? Is several 3, 4, 5? Right? So be in the mindset of understanding what they're looking for and look for ways to say yes, but not lie. Yes, but not lie. Okay, be honest with yourself. So with characteristics of prostrating attacks, averaging 1 in 2 months over the last several months. So basically that's over the last several months, you've had 2. So if you had 2 recently in the last half a year, right? Okay, if you say yes, cool. You know you should at least be at 10%. Then 30%. To have a 30% rating for migraines, it says with characteristic prostrating attacks occurring on average once a month over the last several months. Okay, so then you're at 30%. If you say yes, look, you're the patient, right? If you know that you have, then you have. There you go, 30%. You should be rated 30%. Unless you should be rated 50. Let's find out. So here's the 50%, right? With very frequent, completely prostrating and prolonged attacks. Well, I'll tell you what, that itself, portion of it, is describing a migraine, right? It's not a headache, it's a migraine. I am laid out hugging the side of a toilet because it's cold, right? Trying to, the light hurts my eyes, any noise, I can't lay down. I feel like my heart's beating in my head, right? So it's completely prostrating and prolonged. They last hours, and the residual, if it goes from a major migraine into just a bad headache eventually, and then eventually that will wear off, right? So prolonged attacks, productive of severe economic inadaptability. So here's the key for the 50%. Most people, if you're holding down a job, right? If you have a job and you haven't been fired, you go, well, no, I work, I'm fine, right? Well, have you had to take any time off? Have you had to use up all your sick days? Did you have to take, non-paid time off? Did you have to switch your job? Did you have to switch your job and take a lower paid job to do something that was a little more compatible to you with your migraines? If the answer is yes to any of those or any variations of those, then the answer to that is yes. It is productive of a severe economic inadaptability. So it's important, again, to read the schedule of ratings and understand where it's at, because you're going to be asked questions that prompt answers that would give this as the answer. So that way the rating can happen, right? So how often do you have your migraines? Does it have any sort of economic impacts for you? You're going to get those types of questions at your C&P exam. Very important. I tell people, look, print it out, take it with you. Make sure that you don't forget what to say. I mean, this is just the migraine one. The other one is the, GERD. The GERD schedule of ratings is, if you miss one word, it'll drop you from a 30 to a 10, because the 10% rating is you have 2 or more symptoms of the symptoms for the 30% evaluation. Mm-hmm. So if you don't name all of the symptoms for the 30%, well, then they're going to make you a 10, even if you have all of the symptoms for the 30%. It's a lot of medical mumbo jumbo, right? It's medical terminology with words that don't even make sense because you don't know what they mean. So you have to Google search it and get the real person definition. So I did that for the 60% rating here, just to read to you. And I'm hammering home on this, Clay, because I want people to understand the importance of the information that's at their fingertips. So for a 60% GERD rating, you have to have symptoms of pain, vomiting, material weight loss, and vomiting of blood, or not and, or you have feces that's containing partially digested blood with moderate anemia or other symptom combinations productive of severe impairment of health. So that is it. Now, what's funny is that if you read the 30%, it talks about persistent recurrent pain in the upper abdomen with difficulty swallowing, heartburn, and regurgitation, right? So what's funny is they're talking about regurgitation, they're talking about heartburn, but a lot of times we're not going to say those things. We might just say heartburn. You're not going to say regurgitation, because that's what I feel like when I have my heartburn. I have heartburn. That's all you say. And so because that's all you say, they drop you down lower and lower and lower. And so print it out, take it with you to your CMP exam, read off of it as they're asking you these things to make sure that you don't miss a single word. This will help two things. One, it will help to make sure that you're in the best position to obtain the service connection rating that you deserve. And two, in the event that you don't, you know that you provided all of that information and it should be there. And somebody either A, overlooked it or didn't pay the right attention to it. And you can file different ways when you disagree to have that re-looked at. And that's an important piece to make sure that you know that you have that in there. So bottom line is yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you said on that, Clay. Now the CMP exam's done. They are successful. They feel good with it. The VA wraps up their claim. They get that notice in the mail, and there's important information in those, right? It tells you important. People don't read it all. That's the funny thing, right? They just get mad and throw it against the wall. So what are some of the key things that you can find in that decision from the VA? So now this is coming back, this theoretical claim that we filed.
Yeah, so if you go back to the beginning and look at the big three, there are specific 38 CFR codes for each of those. In that decision letter, it gives you the playbook. It says it's going to start the same thing. This condition has been approved at whatever percent. This condition has been denied, right? Whatever it says. Below that, it'll say each claim needs an in-service event, 38 CFR code, current diagnosis, 38 CFR code, and a net nexus. Below that is going to be an explanation of your in-service events, right? Or your current diagnosis or lack of. And then the big one, about in the middle way of that paragraph, is going to talk about the nexus and the rationale. And that is key, right? And so it might say something like, although you had records from service, the condition was not clinically diagnosed. Therefore, the CMP examiner gave an unfavorable exam, whatever it said. Below, and this is for denial. Below that, it's going to say favorable findings. And it's going to tell you what you do have based on the big three. So you either have the in-service event, the current diagnosis, and then obviously if you're denied, you don't have the nexus. And so it might say, your service treatment records do contain complaints of, heartburn-like symptoms, gastritis, GERD, whatever you want to call it. Or it'll say you have been diagnosed with this disability, or both. Hopefully it says both. And then you can take those favorable findings and say check mark, right? You have the big three, 1, 2, 3. You can check which ones you have, X which ones you don't. And now on that X, you're like, okay, I need to get evidence, right? Or you say, wait a minute, I had evidence, right? Why wasn't that looked at? And that's really what pushes us to the appeals process. So go ahead and take that one. When we're at the appeals process, what are your options? What do they mean?
Right. And I'll tell you that this all goes back to, as well, having that accredited representative have your file, because now you can go back to them. They can go into your file and make sure that, was it faxed over and did a fax page get sucked under and that evidence didn't show up, right? Or, there it is. It's clearly in the file. Or let me review the CMP examiner's notes on this that got supplied to the VA, and they do say this and they did mention that. Okay, we know where we're at, and that helps in the event of a denial. And I'm going to throw out not just a denial, a disagreement with the decision, because denial kind of means that you were denied completely. But you could also, they gave me a 0%, they gave me a 10%. You weren't denied, you just got a lower rating than what you believe you should have had, because you reviewed the schedule of ratings and you should be at 30% for migraines, and they gave you a 10. So now when you're utilizing that accredited rep to have these conversations, and they could look it up, they can tell if the evidence is in there. And if the evidence is in there, there's some different options, right? You don't necessarily, you have different options when it comes to, I guess, disagreeing with the VA's decision, right? So you can file additional claims to have them relook at it, or you can file an appeal through the board. So let's talk about the first two additional claims for additional review that you can do with the VA on a disagreed decision. So I'll let you go ahead and start it off, Clay.
Oh yeah, so I'll start with something called a higher level review, and just to be upfront, an overwhelming majority of higher level reviews agree with the denial, right? So it's confirmed,
Mm-hmm.
continued is what you'll see. And there's
Yep.
a reason for that. It goes back to your evidence. Did you submit your evidence with this claim? Because in a higher level review, they can only review your evidence. There's different types of higher level reviews. You can just do, say, hey, VA, can someone else look at this, right? I never recommend that one. I always recommend a higher level review with an informal conference. All
Mm-hmm.
that means is some rater in a very common tone, like we're speaking, is going to pick up their phone, dial your number, and say, hey, let's talk about migraines. That gives you
Mm-hmm.
an opportunity to say, hey, hey, VA rater, whoever, I submitted a higher level review. I got 0% for migraines. I know I have, like, I was prescribed sumatriptan by VA primary care. I've re-upped my prescription 3 times. That clearly shows I have, 3
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
prohibiting migraines per month.
Yep.
That is hard medical evidence, and the
Yep.
rate will be like, "You're right," you know,
Yep. Yep.
essentially did their job for them. And on the spot, this is what I love about higher level reviews. On the spot, if you have the evidence, they can change that from a 0 to a 50 or 30,
Mm-hmm.
like that. Okay. They
Yep.
have the
Yep.
power to do that.
Yep.
Now, let's talk about the opposite. You don't have the evidence, right? Um, you submit a higher level review with an informal conference. The VA is looking at the evidence that you don't have, and they're like, "Hey, talk to me about migraines." And you say, "Oh, well, I get migraines 2, 3 times a month." Again, that self-report, it's valid. I'm not invalidating,
Right.
or reports, but it's very low. And the rater will be like, "Hey, based on this evidence, this is the decision that we are legally required to make." It would be
Right.
wrong if the rater gave
Yep.
you that decision, right? And
Right.
so it all comes back down to one thing every single time: it's evidence. So
Yep.
that's higher level reviews for disagreements, and informal conferences, but you also have supplemental appeals. If you want to go ahead and take that one.
Sure. So real quick on the higher level reviews, the I love that you mentioned the request and informal conference. So that's 16 alpha in the form. It's just one little spot there that you got to make sure that you say that you want to have one. It's on the same form. It's not a new form. It's not a different form. It's the same form either way. But always ask for that informal conference because it allows you, like Clay was saying, to really dive in and point out why you should be at whatever you should be at. And it just helps them to find it quicker, because if you don't, then they have to just guess and they're flipping through and they're trying to find it with another stack behind them. So this helps you to guide them right to where you want them to look at the evidence that was supplied already. Now, supplemental claim is different. Supplemental claim is essentially, if you watch this whole video, we talked about filing that claim even when you didn't have the evidence, knowing that most likely you were going to get denied. A supplemental claim allows you to provide more evidence. Now, that evidence could be just you writing a letter explaining something, right? It could be go to the doctor one more time. It could be go get a prescription for something. It could be a multitude of things. New evidence that the VA does not already have. So with that helps you to really get that whole claim kind of evaluated with that new evidence in light. Now, if kind of going back to what Clay said, a lot of times with the higher level reviews, they're gonna hold their original decision. Doesn't mean they don't ever change their mind, because they do, if you can point it out. And again, this goes back to what we're saying. If you take the time, you put in that intent to file, you develop your claim, you're doing all the things right, you're reading the schedule of ratings, you're providing them a DBQ with everything written in it, you go to the CMP exam armed with the information from the schedule of ratings, and you're regurgitating all the information because you have GERD, and you're getting it all in there. You should know exactly what you should be rated. And so if you get something lower, you're going to come back and combat it because you know it's in there somewhere. They missed it. So that's the higher level review. But if you didn't do all of those things, you might be in a position to where you have to give them more information. Again, back to if you didn't provide any documentation for evidence because you didn't have it at the time, or you just supplied what you thought you needed, and maybe the nexus wasn't there. That would be a common thing, right? I would say that's probably the biggest reason for a denial would be the nexus, right? So. And then it would be diagnosis, people just filing claims just because, I have this, and they file a claim, right? So then you got to back it up with all the evidence because you get denied. So it gives you that opportunity to rectify whatever the reason for the denial was with additional evidence. So whether it's documenting the nexus, whether it's documenting the actual diagnosis, or whether it's the severity of the condition to warrant a higher rating, it gives you that opportunity to combat that, get the evidence you need to support your position, and provide that to the VA under that supplemental claim. Now, supplemental claim is form 200995, and then the higher level review is the 0996. I don't know, it's weird. It's backwards to me because I think that the lower number should be the least one, which is the higher level review, and the higher number should be, but whatever. So it's backwards. So supplemental claim 20-0995, and the higher level is 20-0996. Now, let's say that we crap down on both of those. VA still disagrees. They're still holding to their belief that we are supposed to be whatever they're telling us we are. But we disagree. What's our next option, Clay?
Yeah, so it's the board, right? And there are many, many, many opinions on the board. I'll give you mine. This is the last ditch effort. Okay. It is definitely the last resort. There hasn't been a single time where I look at a denial and like, hey, go to the board, right? It's always HLR supplemental, right? I would even probably do 2 supplementals before I recommend the board. Obviously, it's situation dependent, right? But the board is literally a court case, right? A judge is going to sit on that, and they're using 38 CFR as the basis criteria, and you are arguing VA policy and regulation. That is really when you want to start considering an attorney at that point. Again, my opinion, can you use attorneys the whole way through? Sure, right? But if you're at the board, a good analogy is if you're a divorce lawyer, when you get a divorce, you still hire a divorce lawyer, right? Lawyers get lawyers.
Right.
That should tell you something.
Right.
And so you're going in front of the judge. They're looking at all of your evidence, right? It's medical literature, studies. If you provided an independent medical opinion or a nexus letter, they're going to look at that. They're going to weigh that opinion versus a CMP examiner's opinion. All of these things come into play, and that is going to take years, right? Timelines aren't something that we really know. HLRs are generally faster, right? Until it gets put back into the standard claim process. Supplemental claims are generally, right, the same as a standard claim, generally. But the board, no less than 1 year, probably multiple, right? That's my take on it. It's really a last ditch effort. Like, the VA made a mistake and you're arguing their mistake. That's really what the board is for.
Right.
But there's tons of opinions on it if you want to give yours.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I have I have both, personal and professional opinions, right? So my personal opinion, it was fine, time consuming, lengthy, sure. End result, awesome. I went from personally a 30% for migraines to a 50% for migraines by taking it that way. Now, and same thing on the professional side. So for those that don't know, I have been accredited with the VA for many years. I was a VS, a veteran service officer, ran a team, doing thousands of claims a year out of our office. And so I'm very familiar with the process. And I have seen situations that I didn't think were going to make it, and I'll attribute it to substantial lay evidence that the VA tends, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, it could be geographical based on the different, VA centers and so forth. But I feel, I have nothing to prove this with, it's just my own, from my office perspective, that the VA's employees who process claim stuff don't give as much weight to lay evidence as the judges do. The judges give way more weight to lay evidence than the VA. So I think I definitely would not tell somebody not to. It's just be prepared and try to get it right the first time. That's and I think that's your point too. Our whole point of this is try to get it right the first time. Make it easy for the VA to rule in your favor, both with service connection and rating percentage. Now, if you do have to go to the BVA, which is the Board of Veterans Appeals, you do have 3 options, just like with your disagreement with the VA's decision. You can decide whether you want a higher level review. You can decide whether you want a supplemental claim, or you can decide if you want to take it to the board. Well, when you go to the board, now you have 3 more decisions to make. It's nothing but decisions and nuance. It's no wonder people are confused. So your first option is you can have them do a direct review, which is kind of like a higher level review where they just review what you submitted to the VA and you believe the VA screwed it up. But all the evidence is there to rule differently. Could be service connection, could be rating percentage. It's whatever it is. Your second option is submit new evidence, kind of like a supplemental claim. You're providing additional evidence to the board, in this case, to rule in your favor. You can also cite other decisions from the board on similar circumstances, right? So I've done that before. Find old board decisions on a similar case. Veteran has this condition, blah, blah, blah. Find 3 or 4 of those to kind of show them that other judges ruled this way for similar situations, and you probably should too. And the third option is you could request a hearing, and that hearing can be virtual. It could be at a video conference at a VA location near you, or if you want, if you're close, you could go to DC, but you got to pay for it out of your pocket. So you don't get a free vacation, unfortunately. So those are your options with the board. Like Clay said, it does take a while. But then guess what? If you disagree with their decision, now here's the deal. They will come back one of 3 things. They will either approve, deny, or remand. Remand is kicking it back to the VA to do more work. Okay, it's still a win. In my book, remand is you're still winning because you're still in the game. And the VA is getting now pressure from the board to make it happen. So I've seen many of those circumstances work out well. Now, let's say that it all boils down and you still crap out. And now, if you wanted to, you could take it to the United States courts, or the United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. So it's kind of like a lower court and higher court for veterans claims specifically. And then lastly would be the Supreme Court, right? And of course, I'm kind of with you, Clay. I might be a little bit wavering with the BVA. You might be able to deal with that yourself. But if you start going to the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, absolutely, I wouldn't touch that myself never. Definitely get an attorney involved personally. That would be my opinion. But BVA, I think it would just depend on the circumstances.
Yeah, and there's a time and place for the board. I don't want it to seem like I'm against the board, right? So, for instance, if you're denied, right, you have the in-service events, your records contain complaints, but this condition has not been clinically diagnosed. Do not take that to the board, right? You know what you should do? Go get clinically diagnosed, right? Or hey, I was clinically diagnosed. Y'all missed it. I'll do a higher level review. So small things like 90. If I had to give a weight, 98% of claims can be settled within HLR and the supplemental claim process. When you're
Agreed.
at the board is when the VA won't budge, right?
Right.
An increase is a great example, especially for migraines, because
Yep.
the 30 to 50 is ambiguous, like
Right.
most things at the VA. And
Right.
so sometimes it takes, daddy to say, hey, that's 50%, right?
Right.
End of
Totally.
story.
Yep.
So there's a time and place for it. It's just, make the best informed decision for you.
And the purpose of this video is to avoid having to do any of those, right?
Yeah.
The whole purpose of this is how to do a claim right the first time and hopefully get the decision right the first time to avoid a higher level review, to avoid the supplemental, to avoid the board completely, because like you indicated way back at the beginning, it causes a whole other layer of stress and anxiety to go through that process, and pins and needles, and it's a lot. So try to avoid it at all costs. And but if you do have to utilize it, it's good to know that it's there. And if you hit all the timelines, you're preserving that initial intent to file date for any back pay, which is fantastic. So I think we covered a lot, Clay. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of nuance, and quite frankly, we could have given several different, completely different examples that would have made this much longer. So I think that we gave enough to get through to really paint the picture of the importance of certain things and the different tools that are in our quiver, so to speak, when it comes to our VA disability compensation hunt. Quiver hunt.
Yeah, no, you got it.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So with that, hey, I'm good here. How you doing?
I'm good. This is great.
All right.
We did cover a lot, and it really gets back to you said it right at first. You don't even want to get there. Spend the time and the intent to file, gather the evidence, submit a fully developed claim, or as fully developed as you can make it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
That's all.
You nailed it. Jason. Thanks, Clay. Hey, we appreciate you guys so much. Please make sure you subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. It really helps to get the information out to all of us. All together, we are the veteran sphere, and it takes us helping each other to make sure that none of us are left behind. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.